Mark Van Stone, and I've been studying Maya hieroglyphs for 25 years, and I've been studying the 2012 phenomenon for about 5 years. And I'm studying the 2012 phenomenon because my fellow scholars, and I sort of noticed about 10 years ago that people were starting to talk about the end of the Maya calendar, the end of time. And hey there, there's a flyer on the table for you. Thank you. And we noticed that there was people talking about the end of the Maya calendar, the end of the world. And so it turns out that it's attracted a lot of attention from people who don't know much about the Maya. And they actually are, shall we say, projecting upon the Maya their fantasies, just like Kirby dragons. The Maya are unknown, therefore maybe they were the people that were in contact with the galactic, shall we say, brotherhood, or something like that. And they had this interesting science, which was pretty good astronomical science. There's a flyer there for you. And they were pretty good astronomers, and they had this magnificently complicated calendar, much more complicated than our own, but it's actually not more accurate than our own. It's accurate in the sense that when they realized they were off, they would add a day. And they didn't have a specific leap year, leap day kind of thing, but they had ways of recalculating things as they needed to. And they had a magnificent mathematics because, unlike many ancient peoples, they had the capability of writing things in place value and zero. Using place value and zero makes you capable of writing 62,537,421 and 0.7. And you can make a number like that in the Maya number system, and you cannot make a number like that in the Hebrew writing system or the Greek or the Latin. And so they had this mathematics, which was in many ways more sophisticated than that of the rest of the world. But I want to initiate my lecture with a little bit. This is the thing you often see associated with the Maya calendar stuff. This is called the Stone of the Sun, or the Aztec calendar stone. Of course, the Aztecs are not the same as the Maya, as we'll see. But it's really pretty, and it has a calendar on it, so people often use it in things about the Maya. And here's what it looked like when it was painted. And it also has this ring of symbols on it, which has recently been deciphered to read anyway, it's a joke. The Aztec calendar stone is called that because it has calendar days on it, and it also has the dates of the Aztec creations. This is the real reason to go to Mexico. Maya country, especially Yucatan, is full of these wonderful sinkholes called cenotes, which have an incredible atmosphere, and every village is built near one because that's the only way to get water. I want to also talk introduce you a little bit about to the concept of Maya art. Maya art is about Maya life. Particularly, the best art is made for the richest people, the kings, the noblemen, the generals, and so forth. And this is a roll-out photograph of a vase that was buried with the king, whose name is up there somewhere. And he's the guy painted brown on the throne, gesturing. There's some people in the room, and I want to just identify some of what's going on here. Let's see now. There we go. That little guy, one that I just lit up, is a dwarf. Dwarfs are sacred, and he's having a drink, probably from that vase, which has some red stuff spilling out of it. It's made of a gourd. It looks like the lid of a pumpkin. Probably actually a hollowed-out pumpkin-like gourd. In front of the king is a little guy who's even smaller than the dwarf, holding what appears to be a mirror. And the king is gesturing. Perhaps this is not so much a mirror because he's vain, but a mirror that they use for scribing or seeing the future in. And the little monkey character holding it up is a statue. Let's see. Okay. Oh, there we go. This is the word balloon for the king. See the little line connecting little lips together? There's a faint, almost invisible line that actually connects to his mouth. And it's the Maya way of showing what words he spoke. It's an ancient Maya word bubble. This fellow is another sacred person. The other kind of people you'll often see in court, besides dwarfs, are hunchbacks. People with a deformed back and people who are very small were sacred to many, many Mesoamerican cultures. They were, touched by God. And we have musicians off behind the wall here. We've got brown wooden trumpets and a trumpet that is made from a conch shell being played to announce whatever's going on here. And I like the way the guy's actually playing. Wow, wow! He's doing the mute on his trumpet, playing with his hand. So, the bodyguard. Did he light up? Anyway, the bodyguard is the guy behind the throne, looking suspicious. The point is that these people have concerns that aren't so different from ours. They express them in a very different way than we do, and we shouldn't. Just because they're human beings doesn't mean they have exactly the same motivations as we do, or the same worldview. But the point is that they are people, and they are real interesting. And the more you learn about them, the more fascinating they become. And they aren't bad painters either. So here, by the way, is what I think this is an incense burner, which is two-part incense burner. You lift the lid off, you put incense inside, and the smoke comes out of his mouth. But I think that this is a mirror stand. I think it's that little guy we just saw here. It's one of these statues. In any case, let's go out to 2012. When you hear about 2012, you probably have heard that there's a lot of things that the Maya predicted. One is that it's the end of their calendar. It's the return of Quetzalcoatl. The poles are possibly going to reverse. And what does it mean, the poles reverse? The fact is that the magnetic field of the Earth, which makes this, makes this protective shield that stops cosmic rays and particularly charged particles from hitting the Earth, has reversed many times in the past. The last time it reversed was 200,000 years ago, in the time of Homo habilis. And that's a long time, 200,000 years. There's no evidence that it's going to change again anytime soon, but it could change any time. The last time before 200,000 years ago was only 20,000 years before that. It could reverse in a short period of time, 10, 12,000 years, or it could be a long time, 200,000. I think that there was one period where it stayed steady for over 1 million years. Yes?
Will this have anything to do with the Van Allen belts?
Yes, the Van Allen belts are made by the magnetic field of the Earth. And the idea is that, the worry is that if the magnetic field reverses, there will be a time when there are no Van Allen belts and we'll be blasted with cosmic radiation. Mind you, however, Homo habilis did survive. Human beings that were irradiated by the last polar reversal survived. And there's something they call a galactic alignment, which is that looking at the Milky Way galaxy, when it's above us, it goes right across from north to south in the sky, and it rises up from the east, goes above us, and sets in the west, just like stars do, or just like stars and planets do. And when it's vertical in the sky, the ecliptic goes diagonally across it. The ecliptic is the path of the moving things in the sky: the sun, the moon, and the 5 visible planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. These form a big cross in the sky. And they're pretty much the most interesting things in the sky. Everything else is fixed, right? The stars just never change. But the planets move, and they move in very peculiar ways, and the Milky Way is always up there. And this path and this plane are probably the reason that the symbol throughout the history of Mesoamerica, the symbol for the sky, is a cross. You sometimes see it this way, sometimes diagonally, but whenever you see it in Olmec art from 1000 BC or Aztec art from 1500 AD or anything in between, you see an X, you suspect immediately that this is a symbol of the sky. Of course, one of the other things that's going to happen in 2012 is that there's going to be famines, there's going to be wars, there's going to be increasing pollution, as always. There are some real astronomical events. The transit of Venus is going to happen in 2012. It happens twice every 114 years. And the last one was 2004, and the last one before that was over 100 years before that. But this is what it looks like. This is a photograph of the sun taken with a telescope over a couple of hours when Venus came between us and the sun. It happens very rarely because we aren't exactly the same plane. But it will happen in 2012. There's also going to be a solar maximum. Every 11 years, the sun makes a lot of, it looks like this. It blows up. It sends out big solar flares. And they go in a cycle of 11 years. They increase to the maximum. They've been increasing for about 2 years now, and they'll reach their maximum next year, maybe in 2013, and then they go back down. When they happen, they cause disruption of satellite communications. Yes?
Yeah, I was going to say that I read in the magazine that it happened next year, and it's actually cause communication cell phones.
Yeah. Yeah, and our not just our cell phones, but all long-distance communication and data transfer goes through satellites. And it has been, shall we say, increasing. The amount that we depend on those satellites has been increasing for the past 11 years.
What about radiation?
What's that?
What about radiation?
Well, luckily the Van Allen belt protects us. The magnetic field of the Earth stops nearly all of the dangerous particles from causing any problems. Even a really, really powerful solar flare, like they had in the 1840s or 50s, is what should I say, we're protected from.
Tomorrow.
Yes, unless, of course, the poles reverse and we have no protection. Yes?
Remember some people calling it the kill shot, which is what could affect communications on the power grid.
Yes, it could affect communications and power grids. And that last outage we had shows us how vulnerable we are, right?
I know.
Some guy threw the wrong switch, and it caused a cascade of power to go out, and then the nuclear power plant in San Onofre shut down because it had too much power, and the whole Southern California went dark because of one little mistake. We're really, really vulnerable. But we're not vulnerable because the Maya predicted it. We're vulnerable because we're stupid. The solar flares that are going to happen will cause a lot of problems with transmissions and cell phones. So be aware of that. Be warned of that. Don't expect everything to work really well. We're more dependent on satellite communication, and our satellite protection, what should I say, our communication protection is more fragile than ever. So it could break down very badly. But I don't think it's going to break down permanently, and I think that the fears of the solar flare problems are about as we should worry about them as much as we worry about Y2K. Right? Which, shall we say, when people worried about Y2K, they actually went to computers and tried to fix the problem that they thought was going to happen by resetting the date technology. And maybe it would have been worse if they hadn't done that. And maybe, in anticipation of the solar flares, cell phone companies will make more robust communication technologies. I mean, I would. I was working with AT&T. Anyway, let me back up here. And it's also going to be winter solstice. December 21st, 2012 is what the North Americans call the shortest day of the year. South Americans call the longest day of the year because the sun's down there instead of up here. And so it's the beginning really of winter. And that's astrologically interesting, right? Astrologers are interested in the alignment of planets and the connection of the triangulation of planets and the effect that they have on us. And whether you're under the sign of Taurus, which makes you bullheaded, or whether you're a sign of Libra, which makes you balanced, or Virgo, which makes you kind of shy. The point is that astrologers think of the solstice as being a real interesting day. And of course, then there's the galactic alignment, what already showed you. Oops. Here's what the Maya say about 2012. We have one monument that has Tortugar Monument 6. I'm skipping ahead. The Tortugar Monument 6, which you'll see in a second, is a text carved around 669 AD that counts ahead to the year 2012. And the date, December 21st, 2012. It actually does the counting, and we'll show you in a second. But also, what happens on that date, the 2012 date, is that the Maya date is a round number. It's 130000. That's kind of like Y2K, 2000, right? And it's called the Maya long count calendar. I'm not going to explain the calendar in this lecture. That will take another 2 hours. But suffice it to say that the long count calendar of the Maya is like our count of years. This is the year 2011. Is 2011 since what? Since Christ was born, right? Keep in mind that according to the guy that did the calculations, our long count calendar, our year count calendar, was first invented in 525 AD by a priest working for the Byzantine Emperor Justinian. And he counted back 525 years, figured out that this was 525 years since the birth of Christ, and he invented AD, the Anno Domini, the year of our Lord. And then people, some centuries later, were examining Roman history, and they found out the Roman accounts calculated, up to this time of Justinian, and they went back to the time that Herod was king of Judea, and he died, according to our calendar, in 2 BC. Now, what do we know about the story of the three wise men? They visited Herod, right? They visited Herod on their way to Jerusalem, and they said, hey, we've heard there's a new king. Herod says, there is. And he's the one that had him killed, right? But he died 2 years before Jesus was born, right? What's this tell you? Calendar's wrong. It's wrong by at least 4 years and maybe 6. Jesus was born 6 years before Jesus was born, according to our accurate calendar. And this kind of mistake happens all the time. It happens all the time. Here's another thing. When was Jesus born? What day of the week? What day of the month? Christmas Day, right? Except he wasn't born on Christmas Day. He was born in springtime. How do we know that? Because shepherds watch their flocks by night when it's lambing season. They don't watch their flocks by night in the winter solstice. That's not the time that you need to watch the flocks by night. It's where they're giving birth in the springtime. And the thought is that the Christians were trying to disguise their Christmas celebration by having it at the same time as a Roman solstice celebration called Saturnalia. And they moved to Jesus' birthday celebration to December 25th, which in those days was the solstice, in order to hide this, so they could party and not get caught. And then they forgot the original date. Christians don't remember. Nobody remembers the exact date of Jesus' birth. We celebrated on December 25th. We calculated from the wrong year. And we're not so dumb, right? We're good science and so forth, and yet we can't figure out the exact date that Christ was born. And if that's important, then we should reset the calendar. Say this is actually 2016 or 2017, right? And that if we're going to do it from Christ's birth, we have to reset the months. But it's too much trouble, so we don't do it. Even if we could figure out the actual date Jesus was born. The point is that our calendar is far from perfect. And although the Maya were brilliant, they weren't that much more brilliant than we are. And if they're calculating back to a date of 3114 BC, there's just as good a chance they made mistakes too. Furthermore, the Maya and the Aztecs, we know, were fully capable of changing their calendar. I'm getting ahead of myself. But on your list, on the front page of your little handout here, it says, manipulated, the third item. The Aztecs changed Quetzalcoatl's birthday, just like the Christians changed Jesus' birthday. The Aztecs also had a 52-year cycle, which they celebrated with what they call the New Fire Ceremony, and they were scheduled for one in 1506. The year was not looking good. There was a drought that year, and they said, let's put it off. Let's celebrate in 1507. Maybe the rain will be better. Maybe it will be a better augury, a better year to celebrate the renewal of the earth. So to them, this 52-year creation cycle, which was sort of equivalent to this Maya 5,000-year cycle that starts in 13000. To them, it's like, hey, it's not convenient. Let's move the date. You get what I'm saying? It wasn't, these intervals of time weren't sacred at all. And the date that the Aztecs inherited for the creation and the destruction of the earth was a date which the Aztecs called four-flower. But for some reason, they said the end of the world is going to come on floor movement, which is 2027. The Aztec end of the world is not the same as the Maya, because they inherited this date from these Maya sages, and they changed it for some reason. Probably because it was inconvenient. the point is that to them, the calendar was not fixed. It was not sacred. You could screw around with it. And if that's the attitude that they had about it, why are we so worried about 2012? Does that make sense? So anyway, the long count date is the same date as the creation date. For some reason, if you count backwards, we're now in the year 19 something. And when the year gets to be 130000 in December 2012, then the cycle will reach its culmination. But it's been counting up for 5,000 years. Are you asking a question? Or just, okay. The Maya long count calendar has been counting the days since 3114 BC. And along, if you go backwards, of course, in time, the numbers go down. But if you get to the year 0, the Maya didn't call it 00000. They call it 130000. It implies that was the end of a 13 Baktun cycle, a 13 times 400 year cycle, 5,125 year cycle that goes back. Maybe this creation date cycle, this huge 5,000 year cycle, and then when we reach 1300 again, it'll be like the clock striking midnight. The world will, everything will drop down to 0 again and start over. And that's the only reason, that one reason, that supposition, that the last time it reached 13, the clock stopped, started over again. They figured that the next time it will too. Because these people had cyclical time. They had a 365-day cycle, a 260-day cycle, and so forth. So, well, my point is that it turns out that there is no evidence that they had a 13 Baktun cycle. There was one that had, the clock did reset back in 3114 BC, but apparently they did not believe it would reset again. I went looking, expecting to find that there was some evidence that the Maya had this belief. And what I found is, wherever I found any sort of discussion of this belief, I found that they believed something different from what I expected. And we'll get to that. There's a third prophecy, the Chilambalam books. They're prophecies by a guy named Interpreter Jaguar. Interpreter Jaguar is an ancient Maya priest, or shall we say, it's perhaps the title given to ancient Maya priests. And the books of Chilambalam, and there's several of them, were written down in the colonial period, in the Mayan language, but in letters. I got a picture of one here. Let's skip ahead for a second here. There's the Chilambalam books. They're written in letters, and you can see the top one says primero, Spanish word, but the rest of it's in Mayan. Kan hau katun ubuluk kit katun kushoko. That's Mayan for on Forahau, the Katun ending in Forahau. Katun is a 20-year period. In the 20-year period that ends in Forahau, there will be a return of the Quetzal. The green bird will come. Kukulkan, who's also known as Quetzalcoatl, will come back. Blood vomit will return, and Akhantanal will come back. Now, Akhantanal is a minor deity. It means yellow tree place. Actually, the yellow tree place guy, the guy of the yellow tree place. And yellow tree is a name given to a specific species of a jungle tree which has medicinal properties. So he's the god of this medicinal tree. And this is all it says, that these guys will come back. Now, blood vomit doesn't sound very good. But if you read the Maya prophecies and the Chilambalams, none of them are very good. In fact, this one that says these things are going to get back, and blood vomit is the only bad thing, that's actually better than the average. Out of 13 of these Katun prophecies, 9 of them are terrible. And the 2012 one is not so terrible. Yes?
So why are those 3 important, or why are they coming back?
Why are they coming back?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the prophecy doesn't tell us why.
And I also have another question. Why is it 13? Because I know you said they didn't come this year, but why is it 13 coming?
The only reason that this date, 2012, is important in the Maya calendar is that when it reaches 13, it matches the date that the world began with. And that perhaps 1300 represents a creation or recreation, like midnight is the beginning of the new day.
Oh, so these 12 and the 13.
Yeah, we're now in the 12th Baktun. We're going to reach the end of the 12th Baktun in 13 months.
Are they literally going to come back and what I'm saying is are they going to come back in spirit?
You mean these guys?
Yes.
Well, are you a Christian?
I mean
No, seriously. If you're a Christian, there are some Christians who believe that Jesus is going to return, right? And he's going to slide down a rainbow and battle with Satan before our eyes, and some people will be cast down into the fiery pit, and some people will be taken up to heaven, right? And fundamentalist people believe this. And I'm not saying this is wrong, but there are other Christians who are not so literal. They don't see the book of Revelation as literally telling us what's going to happen. And there must have been Maya fundamentalists who did believe this would happen. But the reason that the Chio Malam says this will happen in the decade that ends in 2012 is because it had happened 256 years before, which was another decade that ended before Al, and then 256 years before that. And if you go back 256 years twice, 5 or 12 years before 2012, is the decade, pardon me, the 20-year period, the Khatun, that included 1492. And 1492, what happened to the Americans? They were discovered by people who eventually conquered them, right? And the first devastating thing that happened to the natives of America after 1492, and before the Spanish ever came to Yucatan, was the diseases of the Spanish came to Yucatan. The population of North America was more than decimated. It was 95% of the people in North America died from disease brought by Europeans. 95%. Imagine if this room, 95% of people were killed. They'd leave like 3 of you, maybe 2. That's what happened to the American people when the Spanish came. That was, way worse than the conquest. Even among the civilized peoples who had more resistance to disease, maybe 90% died. It was devastating. It's a terrible thing to the people of America when the germs of the Europeans came to us. And that's what blood vomit is. They were remembering the last time that this Khatun came around. There had been this tremendous die-off, this tremendous disease that I would say epidemics that killed people. And I think that these prophecies, they were remembering something that was terrible, and they're expecting, well, the time comes around again, the planets will be aligned, the dates will be aligned. To them, it was like astrology. The dates are the same thing is going to happen. Does that make sense? And God forbid we should all get diseases like the Indians got and killed off 95% of it. But that's the blood vomit. Quetzal and Quetzalcoatl, that's good things. Akhenaten, we don't know much about him. But every 256 years comes along with these dates. Anyway, this is the date that talks about the end of 13 Baktuns. The word end is the red hand with the purple. I hand color these, okay? This is not the way I color. This means the end. This is 13, 2 bars, which is 5 each plus 3 dots. And this word Baktun. The end of 13 Baktuns, and then it tells us what's going to happen. And this is the prophecy, the date. Sorry, I'll show you a photograph of it. This is the actual stone that survives. That number 4 above in front of the monkey face. This is for how, followed by 3 up there. Forgot my laser pointer. Followed by 3 and the mud sun Kun King. That's the date, December 21st, 2012. And it says this is going to happen. It will be. Oops, it broke. This guy, his name is 9 Dog Tree, will do this. And these broken glyphs are what we call Murphy's Law of epigraphy. Just to say, we don't really have much of an idea what's going to happen. But we can actually read them. It says that Bolonyokte, this god, who's associated with creation in other contexts, this god is going to put on a costume. That's what this says. He's going to put on a costume because that's what kings do when they perform a ceremony. They put on a costume and they channel a god. So this god's going to channel a different god. But it doesn't say who or what or anything else. It just says he'll put on the costume and the grand investiture. It's grand sort of dressing up. So the one prophecy we have from the ancient Maya that tells us what's going to happen in 2012 tells us that a god will get dressed. Which doesn't sound like the end of the world. Particularly because every king who performed any ceremony was getting dressed in that same way. So, like I said, this is the prophecy, the end of the world. And here's Bologna, 9 dog tree. This word dog tree is a homonym for the house post that supports the main roof. So this is a house of 9 posts, is what it says. And it's a big house, like a palace. And this is the investiture glyph. And the Chilambalam prophecy is there. This book, by the way, is in Princeton University Library. So on your list, I have reasons we should be careful not to believe everything people say about Maya prophecies. One is that Maya archaeology is not very well understood, and what does survive is what we've been digging up, and what survives from, shall we say, stories among ethnographic collections and things like that. It's just not much data. There's a whole lot missing, particularly because the Spanish were so good at destroying the stories, right? Anybody that talked about the old myths, they were burned at the stake or told to shut up. There's not much data. And the data that exists is contradictory. Like I said, the Aztec date of their end of the world is 2027. So if nothing happens in 2012, we have another great date to look forward to. And the Mixtec date is different still. And there are probably, keep in mind that the Maya city-states were as different from each other as the Greek city-states. And those of you who saw the 300, what was the attitude, the relationship between Athens and Sparta? They were fighting together in that war, right? But they hated each other, right? They were like Jews and Palestinians, right? But they spoke the same language, they worshipped the same gods, they had the same kind of myths, but had very different ideas about how life should be lived. And the Maya city-states were equally different. The Maya were not a monolithic culture like, the state of California. They were really diverse, and they were each ruled by different people, and they each had their own mythology. And I have little doubt that the more we learn about Mayan mythology, the more we'll learn that in Tikal they worshipped certain gods who did good things for Tikal, and in Palenque or Calakmul that they worshipped different gods and they did completely different things, and those people in Tikal were jerks, right? I mean, they had myths which disrespected each other. They were not all monolithic. Here's something else. Like I said, the Aztecs were willing to change the date of Quetzalcoatl's birthday. They changed the date of the 52-year cycle to make it 53 years. This is because they were not bound by Scripture. We live in a culture that is essentially Judeo-Christian. We're diverse, we're tolerant, we have lots of religious beliefs that we accept other religions and so forth, but we were founded, our founding fathers were Christians, fundamentalist Christians. And as such, we're, as I say, drenched with this idea that the Word of God is fixed. What God says is it. There's not the 11 commandments, there's not 9. Right? You can't just add an extra commandment. Well, Jesus did, but it's, he has special dispensation. You can't subtract commandments. You can't decide, change things around. You can't say, oh, God was a woman. You can't even say that Jesus was Mary. Remember when the Da Vinci Code came out? The feminist Christians were saying this is sacrilege to say that Jesus had children. They were upset about that. Well, the Maya didn't have that kind of religion. They did not have a monolithic fundamentalist religion. They were willing to mess with things. Also, by the way, here's another reason. Scholars disagree. My buddies and I, we argue about what Maya meant and what the Maya believed, and we don't all agree on anything. In fact, my mentor, Michael Coe, assures me that although there is no evidence for it, that the Maya must have believed that 13000 was the end of the calendar and it would restart. He and I disagree on that fundamental point. I think it goes to 14 and 15 and 16. But he says, no. The precedent is too strong. They must have believed. And that's a very dangerous phrase, they must have. Right? In any case, the strangest thing is that the Maya have a culture of they never correct mistakes. Every book that survives and every stone that survives, and there's thousands of these stones, show no evidence in any place that they corrected a mistake. They made mistakes. We have lots of examples of arithmetical errors. And I think in my book, I list at least 50 places on Maya monuments where we know that they made a mistake in calculation. But for some reason, and apparently, I would say the reason is a card laid is card played. They believe that if you were reciting a prayer and you got it wrong, the gods must have been messing with your mouth. And if you were carving something and you carved it wrong, the gods have guided your hands to say something special. Maybe. We don't know why. But alone, among all the ancient cultures of the world, if they made a mistake, they left it. God must mean it to happen. Here's a bunch more reasons. In all of the literature that I've looked at, there's a lot of it. In all the literature we have about prophecy, there's no mention that the world will end or that there'll be any destruction at all. They do talk about destruction, but they usually talk about wars that have happened. There's a great phrase, piles of skulls, lakes of blood. They're talking about the result of a battle. But they're not talking about a future battle. They're talking about past. Also, there's a text, which I'll show you, where the calendar goes up to 4772. And it's pretty much the same 4772 as it was in 683 when the card was made. Also, the idea that the 1300 falls on December 21st, the winter solstice, is cool if you live up in North America and you're an astrologer. Those are important dates to Western astrology, and the solstices are important days to Western astrology. They're not so important in the tropics. The tropics doesn't have a cold and a warm season. It has a wet and a dry season, and those dates are different. They don't have a coldest day of the winter kind of an idea. In any case, and this only 1% penetration refers to how much archaeologists have done. There are at least 6,000 known Maya sites, and there's many more Aztec and Zapotec and Mixtec and Veracruz and other cultures around Mexico and Central America. Thousands of archaeological sites, and most of them have been barely touched. They've been noticed, surveyed, photographed, and the grave robbers have dug in them, but not the archaeologists. And the grave robbers are not very careful, but they're also not very thorough. They don't completely erase pyramids. They get into the pyramid looking for a tomb, but they leave a lot of stuff for us to find. And the point is that there's 99% of archaeology of the Maya still to happen. So if you're thinking of a field of the future, this is one to go into. But we know almost nothing. So this is the inscription that talks about the 4772 AD date. There's a handout for you. That's great. The 4772 date is on the inscription, and it's the third panel of the Palenque Temple inscriptions. And here we have a partial reading of it. And if I wanted to read directly with you, it would take the rest of the day. So I'm going to focus on a couple of things. They talked about the death of this great King Makal. And this is an event in his life. Then they counted ahead to a year, 7 years after his death, and then they went skipping ahead to this nice round number, 10,000. Just like 13,000, only 3 boxes earlier. And they talked about the events that happened on that date, and they are repetitions of events that happened in his life. And then they skip ahead to a much longer date, a date where the odometer skips up to 6 digits from 5 digits. It goes to the date 1000. Where is it? Well, this is actually just after 100008. 8 days after this enormously zero, which I got period year, it's called. It's a very important period year, is going to be the anniversary. 5 Levant, 1 Bull. It's the same date, the same calendar round date as Bakal's coronation. It's the 52-year times 80 anniversary. And it comes on this date that's really, really close to a very, very big round number. That was very cool to them. A coincidence that they thought was too important to not mention. And they were astrologers and they were numerologists, and this kind of numerological connection between 2 dates was to them very significant. And what they say is that this is going to be the anniversary of the coronation of Bakal. I think they actually go on to say that we will celebrate, right? Oh, there's the date, 10000. So they're connecting these 2 dates. There's 5 Levant, 1 Bull again. So they're connecting the coronation date of the great king, who's buried underneath this pyramid, with this date far in the future. It tells me 2 things. This is the date 200000. That is to say, the 20 skips up and makes a new digit on the odometer. But they're saying that there will be, after 1300, there will be a 14 and a 15 and a 16 and a 17, 18, 19, and a 20. They're saying that the calendar does not stop. That's what this text tells us. They're also telling us that they expect nothing to have changed. They expect that on this date, 4,000 years in the future, that there will be a coronation celebration for this great king. They're not expecting a destruction of the world, and they're not expecting an advancement of the world. They expect the status quo to continue. Which, after all, to some extent, that's what we all believe. Right? None of us really like to imagine our own death, a world without us. We don't like to imagine our country falling and another country taking over. We're all terrified of China taking over, and maybe it will become an economic powerhouse, just like Apple overcame Microsoft. Right? But these things happen. Countries come and countries go, and people die, and the world lives on without them. And although I was looking for evidence that they believed that the world would change, and instead I found evidence that they believed the world would not change. And there's about 5 or 6 pieces of evidence, which I detail in my book and I won't go into here, which say the same thing. They also look back in the past. They connected events in their time to events back in the time of Homo habilis, right? In this case, back in 1,200,000 years back. But there's monuments that go back trillions of years in time. Trillions of years. This is before the Big Bang. And they'll give you the day and the month and the day the week was. These things happen. They have this wonderful sense of time being infinite and infinitely manipulable. And one thing I didn't mention yet, in your many pages in your handout, let's see, yeah, not the last page, but the 3 pages before the last page starts with Appendix 5. I meant to Xerox this out of my book. Numerical factors and periods important in Maya calendars. They're interested in numbers. Like I said, they were numerologists. 1 was an interesting number. 2 was an interesting number. 3 is an interesting number. 4, 5, not 6. 7 was interesting. 9 was interesting. 20 was interesting. 26, 29, 30, 63, 65, 73, 81, 90, 116. All these numbers were magic to them. You think, hey, every number is magic. No, that's not quite true. There are a lot of numbers that are not magic here. And they often have to do with astrology. That's to say, the movement of planets and the movement and the relationship with the planets. For instance, 81 was sacred because the moon's cycle is not exactly a round number of days, right? It's 29.53 days. 29 days, 5 hours, 45 minutes, and 48 seconds, something like that. And that means the 2 moons is about 59 days, but it's not quite. And 3 moons is not an even number of days either. But 81 moons is real close to an even number of days. So to them, 81 was a magic number because if you count 81 lunations, 81 moons, it's a round number of days, and you can calculate days precisely. It's actually not that precise, but you can see that that's the reason that number is magic. And it goes on. Magic numbers as large as 2,880,000 or 9,360,000. These are numbers that the Maya considered powerful and magic. And if you take the number of days in 1,246,826 years and I think 32 days or something, we'll see in a minute. That's actually one of these magic numbers. They were looking back in time a significant distance in numerological terms. This is like a major anniversary, but it's an anniversary that's only decipherable to a priest who loves numbers. Anyway, here's it's 290 years. That's a long period. This, by the way, shows a drawing and a carving, the original carving. So you can see it's not carved very deep, this particular inscription. And this is with really, really good lighting to enhance the surface of the stone as much as possible. But you can see that even with good lighting, these glyphs are not that readable. This is why we always depend on drawings, because the details are just not that visible. Anyway, the point is that the Maya had numerological reasons for connecting their one event with an event in the past or an event in the future. To them, that was justifying its existence, right? The gods did this a million years ago. We're doing it again. We're keeping up this long tradition. And we will continue to do it for 4,000 years, at least. And it's said by extension, they're saying it's going to happen in the year 10,000, it's going to happen in the year 20,000, and the implication is ... This is going to continue through all time. The point being that we can't project onto the Maya our own ideas. We have to sort of, we have to be able to try and put ourselves in their shoes, which isn't easy. Foreign minds are very different from ours. And I want to talk a little bit about the diversity of the cultures. These are the major languages spoken in Mesoamerica. And these languages, some of them are as different from each other as Spanish and French. Okay, they're related languages like Lacandon and Celtal. Some are as different from each other as French and Celtic, or French or Greek. Very different from each other. And some of them are as different from each other as they are from English. This shows a map of the language families. This is the Maya language family, this blue thing. 30 different languages are in this area. But this is a language family. And the red language family, which is Uto-Aztecic, these two languages are as different from each other as they are from English, or as from Chinese. And there are many, many patches of color. The language diversity, and therefore the cultural diversity of Mesoamerica, is enormous. It's much more rich than Europe. It's been homogenized by Christianity and by conquest, but really, when you get to the nitty-gritty of village life in these places, they have really, really different ways of thinking about things. And therefore, we can't expect them to all believe the same thing, can we? Brief introduction to the cultures of the Americas. This is a map of the Olmec region. The Olmec were a kind of they're concentrated in the Gulf Coast, but they had effects. They had tentacles, if you will, in Guerrero and Mexico and down into Guatemala, even down into Salvador. That's the Olmec culture. They lived about the time, between the kind of time of King Tut and Athens, 400 to 600 BC. The Maya culture took off about 100 BC, 200 AD in this region, and the classic period goes up to about 900 AD when the Maya had this much power. Now, mind you, these were all city-states. They were all individuals. Quirigua and Ceibal and Tikal were not the same country. They were three different countries, but they shared a common culture and a common art form. And then they disappeared at about 900, and the Aztecs came to power about 1340, and they ruled that area. So when you talk about Aztec, Maya, and Olmec, it's easy to mix them up when you're talking about these cultures, but they're really very different from each other. And at this point, I want to talk about metaphors, about trees. And I want to talk about this because we know more about their mythology than we know about their calendar. The calendar is quite, the understanding we have of their calendar is quite spotty, but when I show you how they felt about trees and how they felt about a symbol as important as the world tree, you'll understand why I doubt that they had monolithic ideas about the calendar. So the tree. The king was like a ceiba tree. We got ceibas on campus. They have big, fluffy, they've got big fruit pods that break open to make these giant, fluffy things. You know what I'm talking about? It's over by the, just to the east of the one-stop center, or to the right. This is what a ceiba tree looks like. When it grows really big, it's the tallest tree in the forest. And when it's young, it has spikes on its bark. It has green bark, very unusual for a tree. It's called the green tree, by the way. And it has this feeling like it's pregnant. And all those things made it special. This tree that seems to be giving birth. This tree that has a green bark instead of just green leaves. Also, you'll notice that the upper branches of this small tree and the upper branches of this tree go like this. Very few trees are so rectilinear. And they seem to divide the sky into four quarters. This cardinal direction tree was the tree of heaven. It's still the national tree of Guatemala, and it was the tree that was the king of the forest for the ancient Maya. And the king, when he did his ceremony, in some sense became a tree. So the king was the ceiba tree. Another thing that was related to the ceiba tree was the staff of life, food, corn, the ear of corn, the mazorca, was a kind of relationship with the king. Kings often wore their hair in a kind of a pompadour, which was imitating the tassel on an ear of corn. Another thing that represented the connection between earth and heaven, between human beings and the sky, was what's called a celt. It's a kind of an axe. In this case, it's made of green stone. Green's a magic color. When it's in stone, it's very rare, but if polished up, green stone looks like it's wet. It's sacred. It's an axe in its shape, but it's also a sacred scepter that's like the tree. And we'll see more of these. A large version of the celt was a stela. A stela is a monument that sometimes has a carving of a king, but it usually has inscriptions on it. And I don't think it's an accident that Maya hieroglyphs are shaped like grains of corn. I think that a stela was a giant mazorca. This particular stela, he calls stela 31, is even shaped. It's the natural shape of the stela. It's even shaped like an ear of corn. And these grains, with these round, squashed into each other hieroglyphs, they represent grains of corn. And I don't know if it's visible here, but the way corn grows, it grows in double rows. This pair of rows of these two rows of grains of corn are matched to each other, and this pair is matched to each other. You can see that if you strip off a little bit of it. Go to the store and look at your ears of corn before you buy it. You'll see that they grow in double rows. That is to say, if you count the number of rows of an ear of corn as you're munching away at your Thanksgiving dinner, it's always an even number. It'll go from 14 down to 12. It'll go from 12 down to 10. It'll transform as it gets smaller, but it's always an even number. And by the way, do you know how many threads are on your corn? Anyone know? How many threads of silk? Exactly the same number as there are kernels. Each one goes to a kernel. That's in fact how each kernel is fertilized. Is the spur, the pollen lands on these tassels, and one pollen climbs down that little thread and impregnates that little grain. Cool, huh? Magic. I just saw a YouTube video that showed how to cook corn so that all the silk comes off. You don't have to peel it off yourself. Anyway, The stela is like an ear of corn. The ear of corn is like the celt. The celt is like the stabletree. The stabletree is like the king. These are all related concepts. In fact, corn was so important that the Maya would deform their craniums of their babies so that they would be shaped like an ear of corn. This is the ideal head shape. This is a Sanye, the celestial bird. It's got the corn-shaped head. Here's another deformed cranium. They're all over Maya archaeology. You find these people who squash the baby's head so that they will be shaped like an ear of corn. It doesn't screw with the brain, by the way. But they wanted them to look like ears of corn. Let's see. Here's something else. The Sangha trees have spikes on them, and so do incensaras. I think this is no accident. Incensaras, smoke goes up to heaven. It's a connection between earth and heaven, so is the tree. I think the metaphor is pretty clear. We have lots of trees in Maya art. These two come from 50 to maybe 100 BC. We have a bird perched in the top of this tree. It's eating a two-headed snake that's bleeding. One of the heads has already been cut off. The tree is bulging. This is a tree in front of which a deer is being offered, but this is a sacred tree, a tree of one of the directions. Here's another tree. This is shaped like a crocodile. The leaves are in the sky. The roots are the mouth and the hands sort of sucking at the earth. And this is presumably a scene from one of the Hero Twins myths. The guy's arm has been cut off. The bird in the telephone pole has taken his arm and got it under its wing. And somehow the pole replicates the tree, and Carl Talley says this is a Volador pole. We'll see Voladors in a minute. These are from 50 BC. This is from 700 AD. It shows the god Isamna, who's, by the way, the guy carved out our library, the god of learning. And the maze, no, not the maze god, Hunahau, one of the Hero Twins. Presumably the other Hero Twins is back over there. But they're doing some sort of gesture communication. And in this bowl, we have a crocodile turning into a tree. It's the same symbol, this association of the tree, the crocodile, reminds us that the Milky Way is also associated with crocodiles. And so we have a crocodile, a sacred tree, an ear of corn, king, a stela, and a cell, all representing the same thing, the connection between earth and heaven. And that's what we call a world tree. And the thing that the king did, the thing that really most kings do, is that they communicate to the gods for their people. They take care of their people by feeding the gods blood, by the gods answer them by giving us rain and making our crops grow. The king's job is to take care of the people by interceding with the gods. And many, many monuments show the king doing just that. And frequently they look like this. They're holding something across their chest. It's called a circuit bar. I false colored it here. It's got sky signs on the bar. It's got two snake heads. There's a god coming out of the snake head. And up top we have a pair of snake heads on a skeletal serpent. And here we have another circuit bar that's just sort of more like a tube. He's got the same god coming out of the mouth of the snake, which we call God K. God K is the god of kings, the god of, he's the royal scepter of the king, is the shape of God K, and he frequently appears in the mouth of the serpent. It's called a vision serpent, and a vision serpent is a snake who gives us a vision. And sometimes the miners record that this king, while doing this ceremony, had the vision of Kawil, the god of abundance. And sometimes he had different visions. And in fact, the monuments at Copan were named for the vision the king saw. And he's got feathers in his hair. Remember that those trees we just saw all had a bird perched on the top of them? Oops. The bird perched on the top of the tree. That's what those feathers represent on a chief's headdress. Here's two miners from Copan. I've false colored the serpent bar here. The red thing is what comes out of the mouth. The blue thing is the serpent itself. The king is dressed in the ceremony. It's the same king, by the way, both times, a couple of years apart. But the monuments are 14 feet tall, beautifully carved, and they represent the king as a self, as a tree, as a connector between his people and heaven. Here's a close-up. And I should note, by the way, that when he holds this thing, he holds it in a strange way. His hands are like this, called crab claw pose. He's not holding it like this. For some reason, they don't grip it the way that we think might be natural, or we might think would be natural. There's something about the way that they hold this. It's like they're afraid to touch it. And that might be something about sacredness. In any case, this guy's vision is a sundial, not Kawil. I've painted it yellow here. He's got a sun sign on his head. And so his vision that day was a sundial. There's another monument whose gods I can't identify. He's wearing big shell ear flares. And here's another one which I can. These two guys are called the paddler gods. The paddler gods are the two fellows that are twins that paddle a canoe in the underworld. And we recognize one's got jaguar skin on his face, the other one has a stingray spine through his nose. Here's the jaguar paddler. Here's the stingray paddler. So there are twins coming out of the snake, and they're mentioned, by the way, in the creation text, which we'll see in a minute. The guy on the left has the old guy. There's no jaguar spots on it. Trust me, that's the jaguar paddler. Has a bloodletting tool. Anyway, here's a couple more visions. This is a Kawil again, the god K is coming out of the yellow snake's mouth, flames coming out of his forehead. God K is a really strange god. Here he is coming out of the snake held by the San Francisco Stella Queen. This is probably the closest real Maya stela you're going to see, because the museum in San Francisco, this beautiful object, and she's holding the snake that's writhing around her body, going through a tube in her arms, and out of its mouth, at the very top, comes this, let's see closer here, comes this god with flames coming out of his head, and that's kind of like a hook. In any case, he's the god K, the god of flames. And, I know what I want to say. The king is supposedly representing the Milky Way. He or she does this, and the serpent bar across his chest. The word for sky and snake are the same word in Maya. They're the same in some other Mesoamerican languages. And perhaps going back to the Olmecs, the concept of the snake representing the ecliptic, crossing the tree, which the king represents, is what's going on. The serpent bar is the sky, or it's the movement of the planets in the sky. Here's a nice picture of the Milky Way from a cave in Arizona. This is a good reason to go out to the desert, by the way, just to see the Milky Way. You don't get to see it from around here because the sky is so blue. And a number of stelae have the king holding the serpent bar at an angle. His belt is marked with sun, sky, and darkness. Sky, darkness, and star. These are hieroglyphs that tell us that this band represents the sky. It's got this one is from Sebal. Here's another monument from Naranjo. Again, the guy's holding the bar at an angle. And here's another one from Kobat, where the king's holding the bar at an angle. And I thought, why are they holding it at an angle? It doesn't seem, very, very, natural. But in fact, the ecliptic goes at an angle. And I think that the ones that are at an angle, they're actually trying to imitate the motion of the planets across the galaxy. So, a little bit more about trees. We can't project our own meanings onto the Maya ideas of things. We have to sort of try to listen very carefully because they have a different idea about things than we do. For example, the Maya I mentioned before had no scripture that was inerrant. Christianity and Judaism and Islam do. The Jesus father your children, that was we already done that with the Da Vinci Code, right? But imagine it's almost unimaginable that Adam didn't sin. The idea of Adam saying, "Nope, I'm not going to do that. God said, don't touch it," or something like that, or vice versa. Adam is the first one who did the other. Here's another one that shows it does happen. How many people know Abraham's sacrifice? God said, "Abraham, I want you to give me your son." Abraham said, "But I love my son," right? And so he took Isaac to the mountaintop, and Isaac's dad. Isaac says, "Dad, what are you doing?" Ties him to the altar. He gets his knife out to kill him, and God stops him. An angel grabs his hand and gives him a ram to sacrifice instead. Isaac is saved, and he goes on to father the race of the Jewish race, right? Great story. And if Isaac had to be saved, or the race wouldn't have happened, right? How do people know the Muslim version of the story? Ishmael, the first son of Abraham, who was the father of the Arabs, was the one up there on the altar.
Abraham.
Exactly the same story, exactly the same guy, exactly, except that it's a different sacrifice guy. So both these, so which story is right? Which one's the truth? Right? And the answer is that myths are more than truth. Myths are something beyond factual history. They have a symbolic meaning, and what the Arabs were saying is that we are the chosen race, and what the Jews are saying is that we are the chosen race. And the whole problem in the Middle East is they're saying, no, we're the chosen race, no, we're the chosen race, right? They're both chosen. And everyone's chosen. Everyone manipulates myths to their own needs. And the Maya just did this a lot more freely than we do. Anyway. And I want to show you some varieties. Thanks for coming, by the way.
Yes.
I want to show you some of the varieties of one mythological symbol. The tree that we've just been looking at. Here's something that looks like a saber tree, like that one. This was from 1500 AD. The Dresden Codex was made just before the conquest, and it shows a guy chopping himself out of a tree. We know it's a saber because it's got spikes. It's pregnant. It's got branches that go straight out, and this guy's chopping his way out of the tree. This is Chak, the storm god. The tree's also got two sides which are different colors. It's probably a male-female tree, and it's based just like the ones we saw in Isapa 1,500 years earlier. It has a crocodile sucking the earth, right? So here's another one. This is Maya, and this is Mixtec. Mixtec was down in Oaxaca, some distance from Maya country. And this is also like a saber tree. It has, instead of having spikes, it has what the Mixtec used to indicate was made of stone marks. The diagonal lines are also stone marks. So they have this tree made of stone, and it's got, instead of a crocodile, it's got a woman's face. And instead of chopping himself out, we have the tree being chopped by two guys, one with a metal tool, one with a tool made of rodent teeth, which can carve trees, right? The tree splitting open, and we have a nameless naked woman and a nameless naked man. This is the Mixtec Adam and Eve. They were born in this tree by these two gods. Both have a 7 in their name. 7 wind, 7 eagle. This is the source. This is the source of the human race at Apawala, the birth tree at Apawala. And this tree too, it has discs on one side and arrows on the other. Anyone guess what arrows and discs represent? Male, female. The disc is a spindle whorl, what a woman uses to make thread. It's a little flywheel. And the arrow, of course, is a symbol of warriors, which is men. This is a male-female tree. This is probably a male-female tree. It's the same myth, isn't it? Right? Except that in one case the god chops himself out, and the other one the gods chop, people come out. And one's got a crocodile, one's got a woman, and one's specific to Apawala, and the other we don't know where it's specific to. By the way, this text here, right next to this chopping himself out, tells about the invention of time. And it ends with the date 4-How, 8-Kamku. That's the creation date in 3114 BC. And this word here, Pata, it occurs up at the top, the second glyph down, Pata, it says the invention of the Pictun, or the making, the forming, this word they use to making a clay vase is Pata. And here they're making the month. And it's kind of like they're saying the gods made time just before the creation. It's a real interesting text. Not very well understood. It's got some peculiarities to it. But it has day, month, year, 20-year period, Katuz. That's a Batu, and then above that is a Pictun, which is an 8,000-year period. We're talking about the periods of time. And these are saber trees. And there's the saber tree of the crocodile bottom from 1,500 years earlier. Here's a Teotihuacan version of the tree. This is the great goddess, they call her. She's painted yellow. She's otherwise completely covered with costumes. She's got a warbird on her headdress. She's spilling out big dollops of treasure and wealth and food. And she's got two guys next to her that are pouring out from conch shells wealth and food. And we have lots of birds sort of singing in the tree and stuffing on the little branches and the bases. And the tree's a double tree. It has butterflies on one side, the yellow side, and it has spiders on the pink side. Spiders spin. Who else spins?
Silkworm.
Silkworm. What human being spins? Females. And the butterfly symbolizes what to the Aztecs? Warriors. Again, men and women. It's a male-female tree. And the way that the Teotihuacanos did the same thing, they have it growing out of this woman. They have a whole bunch of different sort of dressing on the same myth. I don't see anybody being bored from this tree, by the way. But the point is that the same symbol gets transformed by every culture and reinvented. Here's the twisted tree at Teotihuacan for about 500 AD, and here's a twisted tree from San Bartolo, which is like the one we saw before, except instead of being a ceiba, it's a twisted tree with different kinds of fruits growing on it. It's got a bird, again, with a two-headed snake in its jaws. We'll see this symbol again. Here's the Volador tree. I mentioned Volador poles. People climb these poles. There are four men that go in four directions, and there's a guy in the center. The Voladors generally perform in front of a pyramid in the plaza. The pyramids are sacred, the plazas are sacred too. And when they tear down the pyramids, replace it with the church, the plaza is still sacred, so that's where they put the Volador pole. And so, how many people have seen a Volador ceremony? It's cool, isn't it? Did they do that ever in San Diego?
Old Town.
Old Town? Cool. Anyway, they're quartering the universe. And they're spinning around. By the way, I was watching, I heard that they always spin around 13 times. The guys in Mexico City that perform 5 times every Sunday, they went around about 25 times. They just go around and around and around. But presumably the 4 times 13 makes the 52 sacred number. Here's a representation of the quartering of the universe in a Maya codex called the Madrid Codex. The Madrid Codex shows a ring of day signs. This is flint, this is darkness, this is deer, I'm sure this is Ben. Anyway, the 20 days around the outside of this ring are also on the same 20 days on the ring of the Aztec calendar stone. But here we have 4 petals, and each has 2 gods with a sacrifice or a ceremony in between. And they're marked. This is a hieroglyph for south, that's for north, this is for west. Where's west? That's it. East is up there. Oh, there's west, sorry. So they're mentioned, this is the quarters of the universe. And these dots, there are 260 of them. And the little day signs along the dots tell us what date they are as you go through the 260-day cycle. So this is a calendar relating to time, related to gods, related to the quartering of the universe, and ceremonies. Okay? And little footprints, that's what these are, represent marching through time. Okay? Wonderful little simple drawing. Not too great a drawing, because the time this was painted, about the time of the conquest, the Maya were in a decadent period. They were not so beautiful as the art was going. On the other hand, down in the Mixtec country, they were at their height, and their art is a lot more neat. But it's the same diagram, the same 4 petals, the same 360 days. The day signs are named and numbered, but it's got different pictures, and it shows, in this case, 2 gods around a ceiba tree with I guess that's a hummingbird or laurel. Here we have a parrot in a cacao tree with 2 guys. Here's 2 women over a spiky tree, and then 2 other gods with a green tree with I guess that's a quetzal. Oh, there's a hummingbird. So I don't know what bird it is. Anyway, 4 different birds, 4 different trees, 4 different pairs of gods. In fact, the 9 gods here are called the 9 lords of the night. And they represent a 9-day cycle to both the Aztecs and Maya. Plus, we have these intercardinal directions. Again, this is north, south, west, and east. I think it's flipped in one of them in the the Maya Codex. But the guy in the center has streams of blood connecting him to the leg, the rib cage, the head, and the hand of Tezcatlipoca, who's been cut into pieces and scattered to the four either cardinal directions. And then you have special plants with special birds in all the four corners. It's essentially the same diagram, except that there's different gods, different, more specific, this is actually much more symmetrical than mine, because there's a tree in all four corners. And there's also colors, green, yellow, red, and I guess this is supposed to be black. The four colors the Aztecs associated with the four directions happen to be different than the four colors the Maya associated with the four directions. And the Maya had five colors, but the center color was green. In any case, this is a diagram of using trees to represent the four directions. And here's either, I was going to say it's another Mishtek manuscript. It's really not thought to be Mishtek anymore. It's probably from Cholula. But we have a parrot, a red macaw, in a red tree growing out of a red skeleton, and the tree is growing suns for fruits, and it has spikes on it. So it might be a kind of cactus, or it might be a ceiba. It's the same shape as the ceibas. There it is again. So this is the south tree. The east tree is a quetzal and a blue tree with also, it looks like it has jewels. It's growing out of a skeleton as well. And the tree of the west is it's kind of like an eagle growing out of what might be a new corn plant, and the skeleton on the bottom is wearing a green jaguar suit. So we have different species of trees, different species of birds, different kinds of skeletons, different colors associated with the four directions. And if we could decipher what's going on in the Border Codex, this is extremely complicated, but it's all probably associated with this direction. East, south. Anyway, so they have these 4 pages of the Border Codex, actually 5 pages, refer to the 5 directions. This is the center direction. We have a mature corn plant. You can see a red ear corn, a yellow ear corn, and looks like a blue ear corn. And this green bird on top. 2 people, one is probably a Quetzalcoatl because he's got the jewel of Quetzalcoatl, which is a cut conch shell on his chest. They're both letting blood. They're feeding this tree with spouts of blood, which they're taking from their tender parts. And again, this skeleton, this is a yellow skeleton in this strange pose which people associate with the birth of a baby. This is like a baby on his back, squalling, wearing a skeleton suit of all things. So they associated different colors and different critters and so forth. And so we've got these 5 skeletons and again, this pose. When I first saw this, I thought, I've seen that pose before. This is a very strange way to portray any human being. It's like, usually when you see a person supine or prone, they're captive or they're dead. But this skeleton is clearly alive, and it's acting more like a baby. And in fact, I thought, there's where I see it. This is King Pakal in the same temple that we saw before, that long temple inscriptions at Palenque. He's wearing, by the way, a jade net skirt, which we'll see again. That's the skirt of the maize god. And here he is on the sarcophagus. This, by the way, the sarcophagus was on the cover of Eric von Daniken's book, The Chariots of the Gods, basically saying that this represented an astronaut in a spaceship. This was the flames. The astronaut's in this sort of weightless position because his necklace and things are floating. He's twiddling the dials. And this was, in 1962, this is how we thought that the people from outer space would come to us. In any case, he's actually falling. He's falling down a tree. There's a bird perched from the tree. It's exactly the same relationship as the Mishtek Codex. But what's going on? Nobody ever associated Pakal's tomb with the directions. It's got a quetzal type of bird. The tree in the middle, the square cross, is generally thought of as a ceiba tree. So this might be a directional tree, but you never interpret it as a directional tree. And I think that perhaps There's a reference here to the directions when they carved this, but I think the Maya were transforming that directional tree into something that was very special to them, very specific to them, and very specific to King Pakal. He's sitting, by the way, in a bowl of sacrifice. He himself is not a skeleton, but this represents death. This is the jaws of the centipede, of the death monster. This tree is part of this tray is marked with the sun. This is a stingray spine. This is a seashell. This is a sky symbol. So we have an ocean symbol, a sky symbol, a sun symbol. This is called the quadripartite badge. It's a symbol of sacrifice. We see this again 10 years later on the Town of the Cross, also at Kalaki. There's a real stingray spine. Shell, sky, sun, the tree with a Quetzal bird on the top, although it's not truly a Quetzal. This guy's got a sacrifice implement, and this guy has a statue that they're offering this tree. There's 3 temples at this place called the Temple of the Cross. It's called the Cross Group. Another of the crosses is a maize tree, same bird at the top. This guy's holding a bloodletting tool. This guy's holding a statue. Color here. The celestial bird at the top of the tree. It's the same thing, right? Different kinds of tree, same kind of bird, but different kinds of tree. And they're doing something different. In this case, they're not offering blood, but they're about to, just like those guys that were eating the corn plant blood. And this, by the way, is a corn plant. This is these branches are leaves of corn, and the corn god is replacing the ear of corn. So the relationship between the temples, the 3 temples of the cross group, and the directional trees of the Borgia is intimate. They've transformed one symbol into another. They've transformed this. They've kept the symbol and they've transformed its meaning, which isn't that uncommon actually in mythology. This is one of those great wonderful National Geographic, illustrations. It shows a king on a throne. He's painted. This gal's wearing a jade net skirt, and so I guess it's this guy's blood. But they did a lot of offering of things. You see that the headdress is wrapped, or has just been unwrapped. That's what the guy on the left is doing. He's holding a little statue that's got the cloth that keeps his hands from touching that little statue. And here's the 5th tree. It's off the center and 3 sides. This is the tree in the north. It's got a blue skeleton wearing a kind of a dunce cap. It's a green and a blue cactus, and perched in the cactus is an eagle with its feathers turning into flints. Where have you seen this symbol before? Mexican flag. And why has the Mexican flag got an eagle eating a snake on a cactus? Because what? Tenochtitlan. This was the symbol that Huitzilopochtli gave to the Aztec people when they left Aztlan. He said, go until you find a snake on a cactus eating a serpent. Then you will know you've found your home. And it took them, 160 years to find their home? They wanted a long time. Finally, somebody saw an eagle eating a snake on a cactus. The cactus was growing out of a stone in the middle of a lake. And he said, we've got to build our house, our capital here in this swamp with mosquitoes. And of course the guys said yes, and they turned it into Tenochtitlan. And then, of course, you ask, okay, well, if this is the same symbol, where's the snake? What seems to be coming out of the mouth of this bird is a stream of blood. You see that? Coming around to the right. This is the symbol of liquid, these little blobs. We've got this stream of blood. Also, coming out of his claw is a stream of gray stuff, which generally represents tobacco. So this is an eagle making an offering of tobacco and streaming blood from his mouth. Plus, he has flints in his feathers. So it's not quite the same. By the way, this is the Aztec hieroglyph for water, with the little beads on the end of it, and stone. Okay, Aztec hieroglyphs on a clay. And this is an actual Aztec carving of the eagle in the cactus. And he's not eating this thing. He's got coming out of his mouth 2 streams, one of which is water, right, with the branches, little beads on the end, and the other which is fire. And the cactus here is growing out of the skeletal mouth of the earth god. So back at this throne called the Tecala de la Guerra Sagrada. And there's a close-up of the bird, the symbols of fire and water coming out of its mouth. skeletal earth creature. And on the back of this throne is a symbol that you all recognize. This is the calendar stone, although there's no calendar signs. But this is the date 4 Olin. And 4 Olin is the date that corresponds to the 2012 date in Maya calendar. It's the 2027 date that will be, perhaps, it will be the end of the cycle that may or may not be the end of the world. The Aztecs did believe in a very specific 5-cycle creation, and each cycle had to be 52-year multiples of 52 years long. And here's a famous painting from the Codex Mendoza. There's a hieroglyph for stone, there's a cactus, there's an eagle, no snake in it. In this case, nothing is in its mouth. And we know it's the right one. This is labeled Tenochtitlan by the Spanish informers. And here's yet another one, where the eagle in this case is eating a bird. This is from Manuscrito Tovar. The point is that, again, this is the hieroglyph for stone and the hieroglyph for water. In this case, with a cave, footprints go inside. It's like the cave of creation. The point is that the Aztecs had all these varieties of their myth, none of which apparently survives with a serpent in its mouth, except the one on the flag. And so it's, like I said, they change things, they change details, they change meanings all the time. The point of all this exercise is to show you how rich their literature was, how rich their mythology was about transforming things, and how insubstantial their mythology was, in the sense that the images stay the same, but the meanings change. The dates change, the numbers change. They're willing to change all sorts of things. And again, if they change things like this, who are we to think that 2012 is an actual hard and fast date? Let's see, I'm going to skip ahead 20 minutes. Let me go forwards here. This is a text from Quirigua. Quirigua is a great Maya site. The stones we saw at the beginning of this sequence were running out of time. I don't want to keep you too long. This is a text, and I've highlighted the word stone in every case. You can see how much variety there is in the same monument, from what 3 little stones together looks like, a single stone, and there's a different stone, a little bit of variety. All these, sometimes it would be squashed, sometimes it would be squashed the other way. All these are just by way of saying that part of the reason it took so long to figure out how to read Maya hieroglyphs is that a glyph might take a lot of different shapes, even still be the same glyph. They had much more, their glyphs were rubber, they were flexible. And there's the stingray spine paddler. That's this guy here. And beautifully carved. You can see a nice cast of this museum here. So this is the first passage. And this is the second passage. And you might say, they don't look that much alike, but if you put them horizontally together and you separate them, you can see that the first glyph is exactly the same. They're distorted, but they're exactly the same. The second glyph is exactly the same. The third bunch is not the same. The fourth one is the same. The fifth one is different. And the last one is almost identical except for the upper left corner. And in fact, the lower right corner, which should say, it says stone. Above it says stone off. That's right. Here's the third passage. It has and then it has a different verb. But this is the guy that did it, and this is the water-thrown stone. Above it is the snake-thrown stone. Above that is the jaguar-thrown stone. And these are called the 3 stones of creation. And they represent the 3 realms: the ocean, the forest, the sky. Snakes, after all, were symbols of the sky. And these are the names of the gods that planted the stones. And this is a myth of creation. This is an event that happens. Let me go back here. It happens on 130000. This is the date of creation, 3114 BC. And on that date, the only thing they tell us is that these 3 gods these three gods, this guy, who's Itama, the one that's carved on our library, the god of learning, the god above him, and then the pair, the Padua twins, each placed a stone in a different realm. And the three stones of creation is kind of a bizarre myth until you remember that what they're doing is they're reinventing the story of creation as the story of house building. This is the first thing you do when you build a house. You build a kitchen. And the three stones support the komal that you cook your tortillas and your tamales on. And in fact, this is reflected in the sky by the three bright stars in Orion that form a perfect triangle. Ali, Tak, Saif, and Rigel. You all recognize Orion, right? And these three stars have in their center a nebula, which is actually a cloud of gas that's producing stars. It's a creation furnace making stars. And that represents the smoky fire of the Kamal, underneath the Kamal. I've tried to position the three stars above the three stones. In any case, this myth, this creation myth, says that one god placed one stone associated with the sky, another god placed another stone associated with the forest, another one placed a third stone associated with the sea. So they're representing the three realms, and they're reenacting the myth of creation. What should I say? Building a house reenacts the myth of creation. Every time a Maya peasant scooped out a hole in the ground and put three stones around it, he was reenacting part of the creation myth. And every time a woman gets up before dawn and starts grinding corn to feed her family, to make tamales for her family, she's in the dark. She's doing something with corn, and she's making things with corn. It happens that the Maya myth says that the human beings were made from corn. And so a woman, whose job it is to make people, right? Only a woman can give birth. Her job is to grind corn because God says so, right? She's the mother of us all. And so a woman reenacts the creation of humanity every morning. And a man reenacts the creation of the universe every time he plants a cornfield or every time he builds a fire. And I think this is a really cool way to intimately connect mythology with human life. Oh, by the way, the last line says, after they talk about the three stones, it says, it was done at the edge of the sky in the place of three stones. It was the end of 13 Baktus. This pattern is the same phrase that's used in the story that talks about 2012. And this guy was in charge of the whole thing. In charge of it was he. His name is Sixth Sky Lord. Now, I don't know what Sixth Sky means. Maybe it's one of the levels of heaven. I think there are 13 heavens, so sort of in the middle of the levels of heaven. But he was the one in charge of setting up the three stones. And unfortunately, this is all we have. This text is our entire classic Maya book of Genesis. It's basically two sentences. And as you know, our book of Genesis, our Christian book of Genesis, is a lot more than two sentences, right? God saw that it was good. You know, that's two sentences by itself. When you're working with stone inscriptions, you have much shorter texts, much less information. So a lot has been lost. This is a good example of how much we have lost, because this is the most complete story we have in ancient classic Maya of the creation. Let's see. So every monument that talks about the creation of the creation story, it talks about the three stones myth. And the reason for that is that gray background I'm showing you is the glyph Tsap. It was planted. And the word planting is the same as planting corn, and it's the same as used for putting up a stone stela. And it's the same as putting up the stones of creation. So the myth basically is connecting what the stone itself is connected to the myth by being planted the same way that the three stones of creation were planted. And in fact, Kirigwa Stela C was one of three stones that were arranged in a triangle that were associated with the three realms. The three stones of creation and the three stones of Kirigwa are related to each other. And it's no accident. Okay, so final little bit of as a dessert, I'm we're going to look at the guy. This is the cross group. We're standing on the Temple of the Cross, looking down at the Temple of the Sun. This is a later temple. And then to the left is the Temple of the Pointed Cross. These three crosses, these three pyramids represent the three stones of creation. And the king Kambalam was the one that built the one we're standing on here. He also built the other two, but he was probably buried inside this one. We haven't found his tomb yet, but I think some people know where it is. Just haven't dug it out. Oops, sorry, wrong way. So here's the three stones named in the Kitikwa text. Okay? The jaguar stone, the snake stone, and the water stone. In Palenque, we have a monument that shows a king and his mother and father in a coronation ceremony, and he's sitting on, father's sitting on a jaguar throne, son's sitting on the shark throne, and the mother's sitting on a serpent throne. And we know that they're thrones because the hieroglyphs in the Kitikwa monument are the same glyph. So picture this. You see that? Picture this throne, one little space. Some people think that the throne is actually made of bones, human femurs. It's a bone-grown stone. Sounds like a character in a John Martin cartoon. In any case, there's a photograph of it. It's beautifully carved. And here's the three thrones. There's a photograph of the carving of the jaguar serpent. I think this is some of the most beautiful carving in Palenque, by the way. And so this carved around 721, these three people on the three stones, three bone thrones of creation. And then there's the third, one of the three monuments called the Temple of the Sun has this text, has this object in it. It shows crossed spears and shield, which represent war, sacred war. The same two guys making offerings of both statues. This guy's got a little statue with the same shield and throne as the big picture. And this is clearly a throne, right? The same thing. And it's got heads on it. It's got two heads on each side and one head coming out. One head and one in the middle. It's clearly a jaguar, right? So you think, oh, it's the three heads of the three stones combined into one, which is kind of cool. There's the three thrones: the serpent, the shark, and the jaguar. And here's the composite throne in the Temple of the Sun. But which of these is the snake and which is the shark? I looked at this, looking for the shark and looking for the snake, and I couldn't tell them apart. And the reason I can't tell them apart is that there's no shark at all. It's just, these are two snakes. And I thought, why the heck would King Chambalun make a throne that has three heads, that looks like the three stones of creation, but only mentions two? Why would he do that? And the reason is because his name is Snake Jaguar. It's the throne that names him. He's taken this creation throne, this creation myth, right? And taken the three directional, what do you want to call it, the three parts of the universe, and he's thrown one away. Because, hey, my name's Snake Jaguar. He's what do you call it, co-opting this myth into his own name. It's sort of like taking the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost and throwing away the Holy Ghost because your name has a Father and Son in it or something like that. You understand? It's like, let's just take this Trinity and turn it into duality. Anyway, that's the jaguar's head, jaguar's ear, with a snake's eye, with snake's fangs, and snake's scales, and jaguar spots. So that's his name. And there's his face. So, he's using the three stones of creation and transforming it into an icon of political propaganda.
Hey, Mark?
Yes?
That sculpture of that face, was he naturalistic or they conceptualized in terms of the sculptor?
That's a good question. I think the portraits at Palenque are pretty naturalistic. The reason is that whenever Pakal is portrayed, he has the same face.
Would it be the same function as a modern period where he said, sculpting as I am, not as a conceptual?
Yeah, well, it doesn't have a modern period, doesn't it? Chambalun has two characteristics when you see the sculpture. One is these sort of thick lips, like the artist style sculptures of Akhenaten. But the other is No, I'm sorry, he's a different king. There's a different king we call Thunder Thighs. He's a great big legs. And so I think that, yes, they are making actual portraits of people.
Okay.
And the Maya did this, and the Olmecs did this with their giant heads. Because you can recognize them from one to the next. In any case, my point is that the Maya messed with time, they messed with myths, they messed with dates, and so did the Aztecs, so did the Mixtecs, and so did the other Mesoamerican peoples. They did not have a fixed set of myths. But the way that they manipulated them is very cool. And I think that we should stop worrying about whether the Maya predicted the end of the world and celebrate these really interesting, fascinating people and how they perceive the universe, which was way different from this end of the world stuff we keep hearing. So, on the 22nd of December, I intend to have a party. So, thank you all for coming, and hope that you can go home and tell your friends not to worry about 2012.